Welcome to an episode of InRange. I'm here with Russell Fagan, also known as Sinister Rifleman, and we're going to go shoot the Red October match at Rio Salado. And unlike previous Red Octobers you've seen here on InRange, this one is a little bit more open in terms of what you can do with the guns. It's not just AKs. And so you were kind of inspired, historically speaking, to build a build specifically for this match.
Correct. So as part of the KP-15 development process, KE Arms purchased the Colt monolithic polymer receiver prototype, of which there's only 2 left in existence.
So, to the audience that doesn't know what that is, explain to me what this is.
So this is an early attempt by Colt to make a monolithic receiver that included the buttstock and buffer tube and the pistol grip as all one piece to speed up production time, make it lower cost, potentially lighter weight. And this was done in the late 1960s. So
you're saying Colt themselves tried to advance the M16 AR-15 weapon system forward using the polymers of their time with, interestingly, a monolithic polymer lower.
Yes.
And it didn't work because?
Polymer technology wasn't advanced enough at the time. This was made using a thermoset process from what we can tell, similar to Bakelite. But the material itself wasn't robust enough in the late 1960s for them to hold up over time.
Yeah, polymers and all those things since the 60s to now have changed dramatically.
Right, and if you look forward from like 1968 when this one was made to just 1977, 1978 to the Steyr AUG and its polymer and its assembly process using linear vibration welding, which we use today in the KP-15, just a decade later they would have had the ability manufacturing material-wise to make something that would actually hold up and be robust.
So what's interesting about this is while this video is not a What Would Stoner Do video, it actually aligns very well with the What Would Stoner Do project in terms of the discussion, because this is another example of where something they tried to do a little too early. Like the pencil barrels were a little too early, right? The chrome bolt carriers were a little too early. This attempt at a monolithic polymer lower in the late 60s was a lot too early. But you're at the point now where that's no longer the case.
Correct.
So you wanted to take this idea and do what?
Do a what-if thought exercise. Like, what if polymer technology had advanced faster? Or what if the Vietnam conflict had continued into the later 70s, early 80s potentially, and what they would do to potentially increase production of rifles.
Yeah, we had a brief gap between perpetual war. We had like what, a little break, and then we had other perpetual war.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, I took the KP-15 as a stand-in for the Colt receiver because they do share so many similarities in features with the integral buttstock and buffer tube, integral pistol grip, right down to, if you look at the fire control group area, Colt reinforced all the same areas that we did on the KP-15.
Nearly, I mean, I'm not going to say identically, but the same concept supply in terms of polymer.
Right down to, obviously we can't take this apart on camera, but I removed the entire fire control group as part of our development, looking at this along with a lot of other polymer receivers as we made the KP-15. And the way they did the selectors is the same way we did our selectors, with a ramp. The detent itself is actually undersized. It's just the size of most of the detent without a rim on it. It loads through the top, selector slides over it. You can put the selector halfway between safe and fire and push it out, just like the selector on the KP-15.
Nothing new under the sun in that regard.
Well, a receiver has to do certain things, right? And if you're designing it with a particular material in mind, that makes you design things in a particular way to make use of that material. So Colt had smart people working for it back then, and they designed it the way it should have been designed. Unfortunately, the material technology just wasn't advanced enough.
So in other words, these whiz kids were on the right track. If they just had better polymer, this thing right here might have very well been the future in the 60s.
Yep.
And it just didn't work out that way.
Because you think about it, if you're trying to crank out a ton of rifles really fast, and you're having to use aluminum forgings for lowers and uppers, imagine if you can just direct all that aluminum towards uppers.
Yep.
And you can crank out your polymer lowers even faster, and all those machines you have, machining the lowers can then be dedicated towards machining uppers.
Well, there's two things there, right? You have the speed of manufacture, but you also have a weight reduction too. So anyways, that's the inspiration for your build. So what did you do here for Red October?
So I took one of our KP-15s. I used a A1 slash C7 upper, so it does have a brass deflector on it. I think that's something they would have implemented eventually to accommodate left-handed shooters.
And you need it with your crippling disability.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
And I used a XM177 style barrel with a long flash hider on it to basically make a short and handy iron sight carbine. To go with this what if thought exercise if the Colt receiver had continued advancing in the 1970s into the 1980s.
Cool. So we're going to go take this out into the field. I think we got 8 stages at Red October.
Correct.
And then we're going to get back to you at the end of the video here and discuss how it went.
Malfunction going into the chamber on that stage.
Our brave military contractors on LARP patrol, pizza resupply, nothing but the best for our fighting men. Tell us about your adventure here.
It's been a hard-fought day. 6 engagements down, 2 to go. Pizza gives us the energy to stay in the fight.
It wasn't as hot as it could be today, but it was still warm out there.
Much more pleasant than the PCC match just the week before. I think we're about 10 to 15 degrees cooler today.
Yeah, but it still was a 7 a.m. start that went until 2 p.m. in the afternoon in the Arizona desert.
Yep.
So how did this idea that you had of essentially taking Colt's original concept and turning it into a carbine work for you today? All iron sights.
Iron sight shooting is a lot harder than using any kind of optic, by far. I have to be much more conscientious about focusing on the front sight, getting a clear and hard sight picture depending on what we're shooting at. Conversely, I also got more comfortable over the course of the match depending on target proximity of just kind of like ghosting the front sight on the target like a shotgun bead and sending it.
So you essentially just superimposing.
Right.
The phrase I've heard before was what, caveman EOTech, right? Yeah, totally.
So, with the stages we shot, I think it handled pretty well. One of the later stages I did have a magazine-related malfunction. And then we've talked about the problem with USGI mags over time before, is that once it's going bad, you really can't tell it's going bad until it does something. So this is the round that malfunctioned going into the chamber on that stage. You can see the indentations from the feed ramps where it got kind of misfed at an angle. Older USGI mag, probably the oldest one I have with me out of the batch I'm using today. So after reloading with a fresh magazine, no problem. So that tells me the magazine's a problem and it is going to get decommissioned. Great.
This is where polymer magazines make a big difference, and why Magpul sort of cornered the market with that. I mean, there's others, obviously, but when a polymer mag goes bad, it's obvious. It's cracked. Pieces are missing or something like that. When a USGI aluminum mag goes bad, you don't really know until it induces a malfunction. Right. Unless you can do some tests, but generally speaking, you find out when it causes a jam.
Yep. But in general, you know, fast handling, as you would expect, relative to using iron sights. I had no problem hitting any of the long-range targets that I knew I was supposed to shoot.
It sure didn't, yeah.
Particularly that last stage. That last stage that we shot, like, that was my best stage of the match. With the targets out to 300 yards.
Ooh. Hit! 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 Hit!
So, you know, if the technology was advanced enough in the late 70s, 1980s to actually produce this, I think it could have happened.
You think Colt would have done this?
Yeah, particularly for government contracts, because, you know, you're decreasing cost, increasing production speed, and reducing weight. All selling points when you're dealing with government contracts.
There's really no loss there.
No.
So let's go through a few more things. So let's go through some of the types of target engagements we saw. So moving targets with irons. With this.
Yeah, moving targets are a lot harder. That's definitely areas where I was I had to ghost the front sight on it. And kind of track through it. I got all the hits required, but I did tag that no shoot that was like super fast in front of it.
That thing was insanely quick. It was unrealistically fast.
Right.
Yeah.
But all the other moving targets and disappearing targets had no problem hitting. Getting double taps on everything.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, obviously, based on the idea of what we did with the What Would Stoner Do project, but the reality is this would have been the future. It's just they weren't able to get there in time. And here we are now.
Yep, here we are now, and you know, continually advancing the art is one of the things I enjoy most about working in the firearms industry.
And using the matches for essentially the test bed.
Yep.
I mean, that's your trials, right? You're doing trials that way. So, fascinating gun. First of all, it's awesome. It looks amazing.
Yeah, Pro 2 Customs, the artist formerly known as Weepley II, Cerakoted this for me to be a Vietnam-themed gun. And obviously for our LARPing today, I bought the appropriate uniform to match it. So
fair. Well, awesome. Great shooting. Super cool gun, and really interesting history comparing the old Colt from the 60s to now. And that what they tried to do then, they just couldn't quite do yet, which is so much of what we've seen, and that they were really ahead of themselves with so much of their technological ideas. Not just Stoner, but Colt, too.
Yep.
Which Colts, I mean, this is going to offend someone, they're not known for their innovation anymore, but they were then.
Yeah, back then they definitely were on the cutting edge.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to see that change, but others can do it for them now, right? So, guys, thank you for watching this content. If you enjoy this sort of stuff, these deep dives, this kind of gun nerd history, like seeing that Colt, which by the way there's 2 of those left in the world, I think, or something like that.
To the best of my knowledge, yeah. The other ones owned by Knights Armaments, research branch.
True pieces of history. If you like seeing that kind of stuff, please consider supporting InRange on Patreon. It's literally only a crowd-funded project. There's no advertisers, no sponsors, no overlords, just you, the viewer. And I appreciate those of you that can and do. And if you're considering it, you can find us at patreon.com/InRangeTV. If you can't, the other thing you can really do that helps us out is not only subscribe to the channel, but more importantly, share it with your friends, because that helps fight the algorithm, which does not do it for us. By its own nature, you do it organically for us, and that helps us reach new viewers, which then sometimes turns into new supporters. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.